Thank you all for being here tonight for FAFSA 101. The FAFSA launches this weekend, so this is very good, timely information that I hope helps you in completing this very helpful form. My name is Cody Daly. I am the College and Career Counselor here at LT, working in our College and Career Center. I can help students, as I've mentioned before, with all aspects of post-secondary planning, and today we'll be focusing on financial aid. Just a few things I wanted to mention. This is being recorded, so if you have neighbors, friends, family who weren't able to make it tonight, they will be able to access this presentation. Additionally, right now we have a very similar presentation going on across the hall in Spanish. So if that is more accessible for you, you can join us in room 140 for that presentation across the hall. Okay? But without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. So here is our agenda for tonight's program. First, I will talk about the types of financial aid. Then we'll talk about how schools determine financial need. You might hear that a lot when working with colleges. They'll say colleges that meet 100% of the need or colleges that meet certain percentages of financial need. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how to prepare for the FAFSA. I'll also provide an overview of the FAFSA form. And then we'll also do a timeline and look into the future. Some of you have already asked amazing questions about the changes that will be happening with the FAFSA in the future. So we'll kind of preview some of those. And then lastly, how many of you are seniors or parents, family members of seniors? If you can raise your hand. Okay. So for you all, the FAFSA is a high school graduation requirement. So we will also talk about that. So I hate to add one more requirement to your list, but we are going to talk about that and how your student can satisfy that requirement. But let's go ahead and get started. So the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The FAFSA is the federal form that students must complete in order to qualify for aid in college. Okay, and we'll talk about the different types. FAFSA is available only at fafsa.gov. As with anything, unfortunately, there are scam websites out there. FAFSA.com had a short-lived life. FAFSA.org was out there hanging around. FAFSA.gov is the one website you will use for FAFSA completion. And I always tell students, think of the government. FAFSA.gov. It is also free, so the first F in FAFSA stands for free. So again, some of those other websites will submit your FAFSA, but they'll charge you $80 to do it, unfortunately. FAFSA can help students pay for community college. It can help students pay for four-year colleges and universities, and it can even help students at certain trade schools. So I used to work with students who went to Illinois Welding School in Romeoville. They were actually a FAFSA-approved trade school. So their students could qualify for benefits to help pay for their schooling. And then, as I've already mentioned, and will mention probably a million times tonight, it is a high school graduation requirement. A lot of you are probably wondering, do I need to even do this? Do I, obviously aside from the high school graduation requirement, my personal recommendation is it's good for your student to do it at least going into college. If you never want to renew the FAFSA, you don't have to. But it is nice going into school to see kind of what the barometer is of how much you might get. And we'll talk about some other benefits to doing it later on. Now, one of the first questions students especially ask me is, what can this form do for me? So the FAFSA can help students qualify for a wide array of financial aid. This includes both gift aid and self-help aid. Gift aid is exactly how it sounds. It is money that we don't have to pay back. Okay, so when you get a gift, You don't instantly always think you need to pay the person for that gift. That is free money for you to use. There are a few well-known programs out there. There is the federal Pell Grant, which is from the United States government. Students, if they qualify for that, can use that at any college and university. There is also the MAP grant, which stands for the Monetary Award Program. That is through the state government. That can be used at any in-state approved school. So that cannot go with you to the University of Missouri. And then there's also additional institutional scholarships and grants as well. So the government also gives each college a pot of money that they can use to help give students some additional scholarships or grants. So that's why, sometimes even if you don't qualify for the first two programs, you might be able to get aid through some alternative scholarships too. But it is all need-based, okay? The second type of aid is self-help aid. It is still aid, but there are some responsibilities with it. First, and as we've been hearing a lot about lately, student loans are one aspect of self-help aid. Obviously, with student loans, you have to pay them back, okay? With work study is another type of self-help aid. Work study is an on-campus job at the college at which you attend. So students can get hired at their college campuses and get paid to work, which can then go into their tuition account. Work study can include a whole host of things, which we'll get to in the next slide, but it can be a really good resource for your students to use. Here are some things to consider. Aid by the numbers, so kind of things to consider for each aid amount. So first, I have to start with this. The MAP grant, which again is through the state of Illinois. I was just over at the FAFSA symposium yesterday at College of DuPage, and they announced that the MAP grant is now awarding up to $7,200. That is up from like $54.95, so nearly a $2,000 increase for students in Illinois who graduate from Illinois high school and who plan to stay in the state for college, okay? The Pell Grant for this school year will be $6,845. And you can see if students qualify for the maximum amount of financial aid, they can get, nearly up to past $14,000, which is a good chunk of that money. Okay, and that's just through those two grant programs alone. With work study, one thing that I hear from students when I say the words work study and I talk about how it's a job, they go, well, I want to focus on my education. I don't want to work and go to school at the same time. And I like to just stress, these jobs are not like 40 hours a week full-time employment. They are 10, 15, 20 hours a week. They are flexible with a student's schedule. They're working for the college, so obviously the college understands if you have a big paper to write because they're the college. And you can also pick what you want to do. There are jobs in the cafeteria. You can scan IDs at the college fitness center. You can work in the library. My job in undergrad was to work for our school's athletic department, and I did the color commentary for their basketball games. Never made it to ESPN, but that's okay. But I got paid to do that, if you can believe that. So definitely ask your students to look into these opportunities. You cannot get a work-study position without filling out the FAFSA. Now, schools also have non-work-study positions. They kind of categorize how many jobs on campus they want to put towards work-study. but work-study opens a lot of doors. Also, wages are varied by state, so whatever the wage is for that state. And I do have to say this sometimes to students, you do have to apply for the job, you do have to get the job, and you do have to go to the job. If you don't go to the job, they're not gonna pay you. So but I also do seriously like to stress that you do have to get the job. They're not just gonna show up at your door and say, here's your position. Your student will need to do that, and then if they don't, they need to not assume that they will get that funding, okay? And then for loans, the main loan program that students can qualify for through the FAFSA are the Stafford loans. They are honestly, in comparison to some other loans out there, really good loans, pretty low interest rates in comparison, good repayment options. The nice thing is that each year it will increase for the student, their eligibility. So you'll see up here, the student can qualify for $5,500 in loans their freshman year. That'll continue to increase each year. So $6,500 as a sophomore, $7,500 as a junior. It'll continue to expand, okay? Also, the $5,500 in loans that you can qualify for, that is split into subsidized, which is $3,500, and unsubsidized, which is $2,000. Subsidized loans, as long as your student is attending the school, the interest does not add up. The government likes to say they're paying for it, but really it's just not accruing, okay? So especially for students, I like to remind them with the unsubsidized, that interest will be adding up. Unsubsidized, unhappy. You will be unhappy if you have to pay added interest on a loan, okay? Now, you hear a lot about financial need. A lot of schools use this, especially financial aid departments. They will say your financial need. This is how schools determine financial need. They take the cost of attendance of the school. They subtract from that your EFC, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but that is your expected family contribution, how much your family can realistically put into college based on the FAFSA. And that is your level of financial need. So I like to tell students that while the prices of colleges differ, the EFC stays constant. So that will never change. So do keep that in mind when you are looking at schools with varied prices. But this is kind of a breakdown of how they determine that need. So let's talk about how you can prepare for the FAFSA. So what information do you need? So first, you need some personal information, things like social security number or alien registration number, birth dates, the schools that the student is interested in. We'll talk about that, but that's very important. The FAFSA is a completely different process from college applications, so we need to make sure it gets to the right places. Also, you will need income information for both the student and the parent. That includes your 2021 tax return, bank statements, and a lot of us use mobile banking, we can just use that, and then different records of investment and untaxed income. Now, the FAFSA used to come out in January, and when it did, there were issues because every student would tell me, well, Mr. Daly, I can't do the FAFSA yet. My parents haven't done their taxes. Well, now that's no longer an issue because it comes out in October, and now the FAFSA uses the prior year's information, okay? And especially during 2020 and 2021, some families' income situations looked very different. I will speak to how that can be communicated, but do keep that in mind. These are your 2021 taxes, which should be completed, okay? And then the last thing you will need is an FSA ID, which stands for Federal Student Aid ID. The student will need one, and the parent will need one. 2 separate accounts. Now, if you have a child already in college, and they did the FAFSA and you have an account, you can reuse your account for your next children. It is your account for life, okay? You can use it for multiple children. But the student and the parent must have separate accounts. Additionally, something that I think is going to be an adjustment this year is they are now adding 2-step authentication. So now when you log into the when you use your, whenever you use your FSA ID, if you use it to log into your student's FAFSA or your student uses theirs to log into their FAFSA, you will need to confirm via both email and phone that it is you. FAFSA has added those security protections, so you will need to verify that. Now, your first step you can actually do tonight if you want to have a lot of fun and go home and get started. Even though the FAFSA comes out Saturday, you can create your FSA ID at any time. So you would just go to the FSA ID website. Again, one for the student, one for the parent. Please use personal emails for the student. School emails will go away at some point, so I would use a personal account because they will use this, even potentially beyond undergrad. So I would use a personal. Like I said, they'll do the email and phone verification. It does take 48 hours for the Social Security number to verify, so do be mindful of that. You can still use it the night you create it, but it does take 48 hours for it to actually process. And I do want to stress, we've had a lot of issues in the past. When creating your FSA ID, things like birth dates, socials, names need to be as they appear on Social Security cards. Okay, if they aren't, there are issues. And unfortunately, some of the times the resolution to those issues is you start over. Okay? So if we can avoid that, yes.
Are we taking questions now or at the end?
We can take them if they're, if you have a question.
On the Social Security, I don't want to sound stupid, but are you putting the parent's Social Security in or the child's or both?
Great question. So for each account, so if it's the student's account, it's the student social, parent account, parent social.
When you get your investments, does that include like your work 401ks or anything?
We'll talk about investments in a bit, and we'll talk about what qualifies and what doesn't. Yep. But especially with students, a lot of students don't know their socials, so just double check. Yep. One. Just one. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like, if one already has an account, just use that one. Yep. Yep. Yes, you could forgot password with email and username, yes. Yes, and you can even, if you don't know what email you used, you can even do by social and challenge questions. So as with any sort of account, they ask you challenge questions. What's your favorite color? What street did you grow up on? You can pick which ones. So if you answer those challenge questions correctly, you can access your account. Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's so much to remember. So, question in the back.
Yeah, which FAFSA account will we be using? Is it the child's or the parents'?
So both, and we'll talk about how you use both. Mainly the student's account to log in, but we'll talk about how they both work together at the very end of the form.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, once your FAFSA, FSAID, I should say, account is ready to go, you can then log into the FAFSA. And again, that's fafsa.gov. The student can log in with their information, their email and password. However, parents, good news, if your student has done all their stuff and they're like, Mom and Dad, we need to, finish this, you can actually log into their account with the student's name, birth date, and social. So you can actually get into their form and complete your section in your own time. Okay? The FAFSA, and this is where we're like, what year is it? For this FAFSA, it is the 23-24 FAFSA. Next year. That is the FAFSA in which you're applying. Okay? So I know we're class of 23, but this is for next school year. Except if your student is graduating early. If your student is graduating in December and plans to attend COD or another college in the spring, I have good news and bad news. The bad news first, you do have to do both forms, this one, 22-23 and 23-24. However, the good news is once you do the FAFSA once, you will be able to renew it each year. Renewing copies a lot of that info over. So I don't want you to think you have to completely start over. You can renew it to the next year. But if you want to get aid, you need to do the one for this school year if you're graduating early. Now it gets confusing because the one that technically counts for high school graduation is next year. So that's why you have to do both. Okay? When the student logs in, they will create a save key. This is another password, as if we're short on those, 4 to 8 characters. Anytime they start a new FAFSA, and we'll talk about that, they need to create a save key. Okay? But it's just another password for the financial aid form. And you will see, these are actually live screenshots from the form. The form changed a lot last year, so I'm putting screenshots here to kind of help you see what it will look like. So, okay, so once you log in to the FAFSA, your student or you, the first section is student information. Name, birth date, email. It'll ask for address, residency, citizenship information. The driver's license question is optional. However, if your student has a driver's license, put it in. It helps speed up the residency, so if they're qualifying for the MAP grant, it'll help them verify that, especially if they're looking at in-state schools of any kind. So it's optional, so if you don't have a driver's license, don't panic, it's fine, but if you do, I would put it in. It will also ask the student's educational status. Here's my little chart here. So if your student is only considering four-year colleges, they will put first bachelor's. If your student is going to COD and plans to transfer, they will pick the general transfer option for associate's degree. If your student is going into a career degree like welding, nursing over at COD, they would select the occupational. And if your student is undecided and is considering both 4- and 2-year options, they should select first bachelor's. They need to select the highest of the two that encompasses both, if that makes sense. If they're considering 2- and 4-year and they put associates, but they end up at Western Illinois University, the FAFSA will not qualify with them for aid, okay? So always pick the higher of the two if your student's thinking 4 or 2.
It's, first bachelor's, 4-year school.
Yes, first bachelor's, yep. Work study is in here as well, and then parent educational experience. It'll ask about, what degrees or level of education your parents achieved as well, the students.
So if they were to LT, would they put that on there? If they were to LT? Or is that work study strictly like in college level?
College level. But but we'll talk about if they work at LT, because that'll come up later. After they put in their information, the students will need to select their school. Now, the trick with this is we sometimes think that students will type in the high school email or the high school name and the high school city, and they'll click next. They'll try to click next. You actually have to search for it and select it. So you can search by the city and the state or the high school name. You will search, LTHS North Campus will come up, you will click select. You actually have to go in and physically select it. In addition, you also, in the next step, will then put in the schools in which your student is interested in. And notice I said interested and not have applied to, okay? You should put in any school on your radar. Even if your student hasn't applied, put it on there. If they're going to apply, put it on there. Now, with this section, it limits you to 10 colleges per FAFSA. So what do you do if your student is applying to 15 colleges? Your student will submit the FAFSA with 10 colleges. It has processed, they will go in and edit it. They will remove 5 colleges and put in the 5 they didn't include before. And then they will resubmit. Taking out those 5 colleges does not remove them, those schools, from getting the FAFSA. Once it is sent, it is sent. But you can only put 10 at one time. Does that make sense? Okay. And with this part, just put in the city and the state. Schools are so worded weirdly on the FAFSA. It's like, I look for Northern Illinois University, and it might be like in.il univ, you know, like it's very touchy. So I would just search if you know the city and the state. Now, unfortunately, if your school's in Chicago, there's gonna be lots of schools to look through, but you might have multiple there that you can just check. So you just search by city and state, check the ones, add them, and those are in the account. Once your students put their schools in, they will then select their housing plans, whether they will live on campus, off campus, or with parents. Now, for some schools, there isn't an option, okay? So with COD, you would live with parents or off campus. However, at some schools, on campus. Obviously, that comes with a price. So make sure your student is putting in the correct one. And I will say, if your student is planning on living on campus right now and then later they change their mind, the schools can change that. The schools can ask that you go into the FAFSA, you edit that, and you can resubmit. So it's an easy fix if plans do change. But that's how they determine if they need to factor in room and board. The FAFSA will also ask questions about dependency status. So with the FAFSA, there are 2 types of students: dependent students and independent students. Dependent students, parent information is required. For independent students, parents' information is not required. Now, determining independent and dependent is not as easy as you would think. So a lot of students tell me, Mr. Daly, when I go to college, I'm going to be an independent person. I'm going to move out of my parents' house. That's not what it means, okay? It's about some of these questions. These are ways in which you can qualify as an independent student. It can be by age. It can be by the degree that you're seeking. If you're a graduate student, you're automatically an independent student. If you are married, if you are an emancipated minor, if you're in a legal guardianship, if you are at risk of being homeless or have been homeless recently, those are things that can qualify you as independent. So students will answer each of these questions, and then it'll tell them their status. Yes?
And communicating is minor, I understand that.
Yeah.
If an our divorce decree that says you can execute it at 18 and 18 is January, how do I fill that out?
He wouldn't be a minor at that point, so I don't know if he would fall under that category. He would still be considered a dependent student. Yep. And I was going to say one more thing. So students, they will see, what's nice is, it used to ask them one by one. Now they can just like look to see and like check if any of those apply. Do keep in mind, for things like legal guardianship, things like that, like there needs to be legal documentation, so do keep that in mind. Also, this is what I wanted to say. A lot of parents will say, well, after they graduate, I'm not gonna maybe claim them on taxes, or maybe in divorce situations, like one parent claims and one doesn't. Claiming does not come into effect with the FAFSA, so it doesn't matter who claims who on their taxes. It would be the parent's information. And we'll talk about the definition of parents in the next slide. So if a student is deemed independent, they will skip a lot of this information. But if they're deemed dependent, they will need to answer the parent information, or the parent will need to answer this information. So it'll ask questions about marital status, name, social security number, birth date, residency, household size, and number in college. Those are very important. The FAFSA does take into account, A, how many people live in your household, and B, how many of those people are in college. Okay? And again, claiming and exemptions on taxes, those don't count. It's whoever lives in your household, who your family provides for. And pets don't count. I had a student ask me that once, but yes.
Number in college, not necessarily, that would be the one that's applying, or if you have any other ones, you include the one that's applying, correct?
The one that's applying and any other ones. So if you already have a student in college and they'll be in college next year as well, they would count. If you have twins, they would both count. So it's total number that will be in college. Because the FAFSA wants to understand, it's more expensive to have 2 kids in college as opposed to 1, or 3 as opposed to 1. So they take that into account when they calculate that. Okay. Yeah. For marital status, they just ask like, married, divorced, single, widowed, and then it's just the month and the year of that date. So taxes can be different. Now, with parent information, there are different types of parents. There are biological, step, and adoptive. Those are the 3 types of parents when it comes to the FAFSA. In situations of divorce or separation, it is the custodial parent who is tasked with putting their information on the FAFSA. It does not need to be both parents. It should not be both parents. It would be the custodial. The custodial parent is the parent who provides for the student. Typically, those are the parents that the student might live with the most time, but that's not always the case. But that's who the custodial parent would be. That is the parent who would be on the FAFSA. Now, if that parent is remarried, step parents do count. Okay, so that would also be added. Or, like I mentioned, adoptive parents as well. So, biological, step, adoptive. When the parent goes in to fill out their income information, they will need to fill out their tax completion status, which everyone should have done it because it was last year. They will select their form. Again, for most people, it's an IRS 1040. And then their filing status, head of household, single, married filing jointly, things of that nature. The FAFSA will ask for other specific information such as your adjusted gross income, tax paid, wage information from your W-2. It will also include some other miscellaneous incomes such as child support, either paid or received, workers' compensation, combat pay for military vets, and also 529 plans. When you get to this screen, on the screen there, you notice at the bottom, do you see where it says IRS Data Retrieval Tool? So this is going to be everyone's best friend. This is the tool that helps you connect your FAFSA to the IRS. It pulls all of the information for you so that you don't have to put it in all manually. Okay? And I'm going to jump ahead because I really want to show this before I get to the other stuff. When you go into, so if you clicked that blue button that says Proceed to IRS, I know it's very small, but that blue button to the lower right there, you will proceed to the IRS website. You will need to select which parent you are, and then you will need to log in with your FSA ID. So remember that account that you created as parents, you will use that to log into the IRS data retrieval tool. It will take you to the IRS. You then need to put in the top portion of your taxes where it says your name and address. You need to put that in along with tax filing status, like head of household, things like that. And then you will click, it says like match or submit or link, something like that. With this tool, it's very finicky. It has to be exactly how it appears on your tax return. Believe it or not, if your tax return says AVE and you type Avenue, it will not match. Names, socials, birth dates, addresses have to look exactly as it appears on your tax return. If it does and it links, that's when we get the happy screen. It shows you all the stuff it's going to copy over, and it copies over a bulk of the information you need to put in. It's a huge time saver. Please, please, please use this tool if you can. And if you have issues with it, let me know, because I know it can give people some issues sometimes. The other benefit, yes? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it matters. I've never had someone have to enter their PIN or like get kicked out because they didn't have the PIN, or it just takes you to the IRS site to match. Yeah. No, it doesn't. I've never seen that happen. Yes. So I would say if you feel like you're currently a victim of identity theft and it was 2021 that you were a victim, I would maybe manually put in your numbers and not use this tool. You don't have to use this tool. So that's the other thing. You can also just enter it in manually. So if that is an issue, maybe this year you just put it in manually, and then in future years, once you've deemed it safe, then you can use the tool. Good question. Yes? No. Well, okay, so first question. Does the parent put it in? Yes. I'm not going to lie. I've had some parents send their children to school with their taxes, and I'm like, ooh, make sure you keep that. So usually it's the student. Usually it's the parent doing it. Students, if they know their parents' login, they can, but most parents want to be doing it for comfort and safety. In terms of the numbers, what's nice about the FAFSA is when it transfers over, you can't see the numbers. It'll say transferred from the IRS in black bold font. So if you're like, I don't want my student to necessarily have that information or the FAFSA to have that information just widely, it doesn't say the number, it says transferred by the IRS. That's what would happen. So it's still safe and secure. Great questions. Anything else on the IRS data retrieval tool? Yes. For the parent section, yes. But if the student can use this tool, and we'll talk about the student income section in a few slides, but the students can also use their ID to log into this too.
You were about to tell us an added benefit of using this?
Yes, thank you. So the other benefit to using the IRS data retrieval tool is sometimes it'll save you from a process called verification. Verification is where your students need to prove to the college certain things. So colleges will send students a worksheet to fill out where they have to put in income, household size, some of those things, because the school wants to know, like, oh my gosh, you put an extra zero. You said your parents make $800,000 when they only make $80,000. Those are two very different numbers. So they like to verify those things. The nice thing about this is it comes directly from the IRS, so there can't be errors. So it can also save you with verification too. Schools will say all the time, please use this tool if you can, because it saves us some steps later on. And we'll talk about verification and what that looks like, but it can help you in that way. Going back to the income part, after you put in your income information for 2021, it will ask you for an estimate of your cash savings and checking accounts. It's the day that you submit it, okay? So, parents will say, well, I get paid tomorrow. Okay, well, you can put your amount that you have today, and that's just how you do that. It's the day that you file is the estimate that you would put in. You will also put in stocks, bonds, and investment real estate. So if you own some other homes, you might put the value of that, or any stocks or bonds, you would put those in. And then also businesses or farms. I will say with businesses, if you have less than 100 employees, you do not need to report the value of the business. So there's a lot of small businesses out there that have far fewer than 100 employees. That is not part of this calculation. Also, make sure that you are paying attention. The FAFSA does a great job of, for each question, it will tell you where to look. So if you're answering a question about the adjusted gross income, it'll tell you, I'm making this up, but IRS 1040 line 32 or something like that. So if you're not a tax expert, no worries. It'll tell you kind of where to look if you're putting those things in manually. Yes? Yes, so here are investments that are included, and I will send this out so that you all can see what's included and what's not, and I'll be happy to repeat this if needed. Here are the investments that are not included: the home you live in, life insurance, retirement plans, pension funds, annuities, non-educational IRAs, and KEO plans. KEO plans. But it does include things like a 529 savings plan. It does include things like trust funds, investment real estate, money market accounts. And again, I will send this out, this chart that kind of talks about what's included and what's not. But those are the ones that are not included. And I'll repeat it just one more time because I know it's a lot of good info. You do not need to report the house that you live in, life insurance plans, retirement plans, pension funds, annuities, non-education IRAs, and KEO plans. Okay? All right. So that is the bulk of the parent section, which is a big part of this. But the student's financial information is also included. So, and in the old FAFSA, I loved it because the pages were different colors. Like the parent section was purple and the students was blue. So you could kind of see that there was a difference. Now they all look the same. So if you're like, why is it asking me to do this again? It's because it's for the student. So make sure you are always keeping track of, is this the student question or a parent question? But just as with the parent, students will put in, if they filed taxes in 2021, they'll put in the completion status, the form type, filing status. They can use the IRS data retrieval tool. If the student doesn't make enough to file, you can still report it. Okay? In addition, if they didn't make anything, they would just put 0 for the income for the student section. And again, it'll ask for things like cash, savings, checking, investments, and businesses or farms. And students do own businesses these days, so that can come into play. But this is usually a much quicker section. Yes? Correct. Great question. So again, it's 2021, so even if your student now is working, you still don't report it. They're asking for just the year 2021. However, they obviously have that money potentially in checking accounts, savings accounts. They would report it there. Also, make sure that you don't double report 529 plans. If the 529 plan is under the parent's name, it's a parent asset. If it's under the student's name, it's a student asset. If it's under a grandparent's name or someone else, you don't report it. So just make sure that you're not double reporting those prepaid tuition programs. Yes? I would say parent, yeah, yep. Because it was likely initiated from the parent, yeah, so I would say the parent. Yes?
So, off of that question, what if there's, like multiple savings accounts or checking accounts for other children that have a parent? Do those checking accounts or savings accounts need to be reported as well?
If they're under the parent's name, yes. And you can just report, if you have multiple accounts, you just report the total. It doesn't ask for separate accounts.
So if you have, just to make sure I understand, if you have your child, like a child account, like a student, and has my wife's name on it, that goes under the parent, not the child?
Yeah. What is it? Yeah. I would say That's a good question. I can get the answer to that and put it in the Q&A form that we have that we'll send out. But I can look into where that would live in the FAFSA. I'm tempted to say the student, but until they're a certain age. Yeah, I would need to check on that. Yep.
So you said if we have multiple checking accounts in multiple cities, that you can kind of combine them into one.
Yep.
Are we providing documentation?
No. No, these are just estimates. Yep. Yep.
Follow question. Follow question.
Yep.
So about the accounts, what if it's a joint account between the parent and the child?
What about a joint account between the parent and the child? I believe that would be the parent asset. I need to check on that one specifically that you mentioned, but I would say joint would be parent.
Okay.
But don't report it twice is the big thing. It either needs to live with the parent asset or student.
My question was more of like it's a minor account, but
Thank you.
on that note, well, in terms of what if like a home was sold and that money is going to be used to purchase another home and it's showing up as income? Is that going to be an issue?
I would need to verify that as well. I can connect with you after and get your email and connect with you on that. I would need to double check, yeah. I want to make sure I advise properly. Yes. What's accounts? No. Okay. So the good news is after you complete the student section of the income, you're done. So you will sign and submit. This is where both the parent and the students work together. So you'll see on the left there's a student signature and on the right there's a parent signature. What's nice is the student will provide their signature by typing in their FSA ID, email, and password. They will click sign and it'll sign. The parent will do the same. So you see how this one says student signed with FAFSA ID, FSA ID? The parent will do the same. Once both of those are green and signed, the student will be able to submit. Okay? Couple things on this page. It'll ask you if you're a preparer, and students go, yes, I'm very prepared, I'd like to think. They mean a preparer that does these things, does the FAFSA, and you pay them to do it. For most students, it should be a no, and to be honest with you, I'll help you for $0 and 0 cents. So no is the answer to that. It will ask you to review. Again, please double check the right birth dates, names, the schools. Sometimes parents and students have different school lists, so just make sure we're all on the same page. If your parent is undocumented, you will not be able to sign with the FSA ID. However, you can print out a signature page. They will then mail it to the address in Kentucky, which is the federal student aid address, and they will use that as the signature. Do please plan ahead though, because that takes its mail, so it obviously takes some time, and then you'll be able to submit. This is what it'll look like when you submit. It takes 24 to 48 hours to process. You will get a confirmation page via email. Info gets sent to the colleges directly. If you made an error, no worries. You can go in and make corrections at any time. So you just log into the FAFSA, click make a correction, and go in and add that and adjust it. You will also be able to download the student aid report, which I promise you will be the most boring piece of paper you will ever look at. It's a very long list of all the answers and the questions of the FAFSA. The FAFSA will also spit out a number at the end, and I mentioned this earlier, but it is the expected family contribution That is how much money your family, they believe, can realistically put into college. I like to describe the FAFSA as having a built-in math problem to it. The EFC is the answer to that math problem. Now, if your EFC is high, you're probably not going to qualify for aid. However, if your EFC is low, you're going to qualify for aid. So for example, if your EFC is 0, you will qualify for the maximum amount of aid. So when I showed those numbers at the very beginning, you can expect to get those. And it will give you some estimates when you submit. Also, like I mentioned, there is a system called verification that a lot of schools use. Most do it digitally now, which is super helpful. So students can go in and again confirm some of those answers, household size, things of that nature, total income, how many people are going to college. Students will verify that per college to ensure it is correct. You do have to do verification before you get your financial aid award package. That is important to know, okay? Briefly, and I know that we're running out of time, but I want to go over some other resources. The CSS profile is another application that students fill out for financial aid assistance. For lack of a better term, I call it the FAFSA on steroids. It is a much more extensive version of the FAFSA. It is used by a lot of highly selective colleges. So if your student is applying to places like Northwestern, Harvard, Dartmouth, they probably are required to complete this form. This form does include things like the value of the home that you live in, the value of your car. It does also require both custodial and non-custodial parents. So it is a much more extensive form. Now, colleges use this because they want to, in their minds, determine financial need more accurately. You hear that there are students who can go to Harvard essentially for free through endowments and qualify that way. They want to get the realist picture of where their students are financially. So please go to the CSS profile. They have a great list of all of the colleges that accept it. It opens October 1st, so it matches the FAFSA in that way. However, deadlines vary by college. So like I was meeting with Denison this morning, and their representative said, we need it by December 15th, whereas some other schools might accept it until February 1st. So please just check with your college to see what deadlines need to happen. And again, you can do both FAFSA and CSS. The CSS is required only for those selective universities. And I'll also include a list of those colleges too when we post information. So here's kind of the FAFSA timeline. A lot of you are probably thinking, when do I need to do all of this? So preparing for FAFSA can be done now. Priority FAFSA completion, I tell students, I'm a little earlier than this slide. I tell students by Thanksgiving. If you can get it done by Thanksgiving, that's a good way to go. Some scholarships require the FAFSA to be completed by a certain amount of time. So like Augustana College, they will actually give students a $1,000 scholarship if they complete their FAFSA by, I believe, December 1st. So you can get $1,000 at Augustana by simply just completing the FAFSA quickly. Verification and follow-up can happen January, February. That's when a lot of schools start contacting students about financial aid. Financial aid awards are typically released in February or March, or unfortunately later, but we're hoping earlier this year. And then you can technically complete the FAFSA at any time. Have I had students completing it the day before graduation? Yes. Yeah, but the earlier the better. And I will say some of the aid is first come, first serve. Like the state of Illinois MAP grant has historically run out at certain times, so it is first come, first serve. Quickly, high school graduation requirement. This started a couple years ago. There are 3 ways for you to satisfy this requirement. 1, to complete the FAFSA. 2, to complete the alternative app. Just an FYI, the alternative application is for DACA and undocumented immigrants, as well as students who might identify as transgender, who do not want to answer the gender question as it appears in the FAFSA. Those are typically the students who utilize the alternative app. The alternative app is through the state of Illinois. It is an Illinois-only form, and you can qualify for the MAP grant, but you cannot qualify for the Pell, because the Pell is federal. But alternative app does count towards this completion. Or you can sign the non-participation waiver. And we have some on your way out. Ms. Kalkowski has some if you would like to take one home. If you're thinking your student will not complete this form, they would just complete the waiver and then turn it into our office. I do want to stress, I had students last year who in October, November said, I'm not doing this, here's my waiver. And then later said they wanted to do it, and they're like, Mr. Daly, I want to do it, but I turned in the waiver. So the waiver is a sheet of paper. So you can always do the FAFSA. That does not prevent you from doing it. If you change your mind, you can certainly do it. It's just something we have to have on file if you don't. I went back and forth about sharing this information because yesterday they mentioned kind of being cautious with sharing information. However, I think knowledge is power. So the FAFSA will be changing in the next few years in many ways. There is the FAFSA Simplification Act. If you're someone who just wants to know, what do I need to do now? Ignore me for the next 2 minutes because this is going to talk about some future stuff. But EFC, that number that they give you, that'll change to the Student Aid Index. They are also going to do some work to the formula that calculates that SAI, Student Aid Index. They're thinking in the future up to 500,000 more people might qualify for Pell Grants with the adjustments in future years. They will also remove questions about selective service. They will remove substance conviction questions, and they will add questions about race and gender. So those are some of the changes coming. Not right now. Right now we're still in regular FAFSA world, but in the next few years, if you have, if there are any junior parents in the room, or if you have younger children, they might be a part of this. And there's some other factors within the FAFSA Simplification Act that have not been narrowed down and squared away. And I just want to say this too, if we learned anything from the pandemic, it's things can change. So stay tuned until it's actually put into place, but these are just some things to look out for. Save the date, we have Frank Palmisani. He will be running a virtual Q&A next Thursday, Thursday on Zoom. That link was sent out. I will send it out again too as we get closer, but if you have questions about financial aid, he can answer those. That's the one where you watch the video first and then answer questions. So feel free to attend that if you would like. And then on October 20th, we will be doing a FAFSA completion workshop here at LT, so if you want help with completing the form, stop by from 6 to 8 p.m. We will have Spanish-speaking assistance available in partnering with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. Okay, I'm sorry we went a little over. 5 minutes. Okay, that's not terrible. Any questions? That comes after. So how it works is you get accepted, you do verification if you are selected to do verification, and I want to also stress, you might not get selected for verification. They randomly select. So you might not even have to do that step. But then financial aid award packages come out. And as professionals, we're really stressing to colleges that, like, students need time to make these decisions. You cannot send a financial aid award package on April 15th and expect a student to decide by May 1st. So we're really pushing that, and a lot of schools are good with that, but it can range from February to, unfortunately, I've seen packages sometimes come out April 1st. And I want to, one quick thing, we're going to do some financial aid comparison award letter workshops next semester and presentations. I have a fabulous resource to share with you all, so we will be doing that next semester to help your student decide. Yes?
How does the student learn about that verification? Do they get an email? Do they get a letter?
Great question. Both, but usually definitely email. So the schools will reach out and say, you need to provide verification information. But the student does have to get accepted first, so it's acceptance, then verification, then the awarding. And also, tell your students, like, we're very eager, we fill it out, and we're like, okay, where's the money, you know? Some schools don't even look at FAFSA data until February. So don't panic or think that you did something wrong. The schools will contact you. COD is even later because they kind of do things a little later just because that's the that's the structure of their kind of enrollment patterns. So typically for community colleges, those packages might come out in April or May. Yes?
So when you're starting a process, you do the user ID for the student and
Yep.
and then when you log in with the parent nowadays, or, you know, if part of everything, that goes to both parent and student login?
If you're the student, you'll log in with the student username and password. If the parent would like to log in to the student's account, they will say, it says on the front page of the FAFSA, are you a student or a parent? That's where it asks name, birth date, social. But great question, because unfortunately I have some parents who made a FAFSA for themselves. So do be mindful of that. If you're using an account to log in, it should be the student. Yes, but you can log in with their credential or their demographics, name, birth date, social. Yes? I think they say the estimate's 45 minutes to an hour. It took my mom a week, but, you know, yeah, 45 minutes to an hour. If you have everything in a folder and in a row, it's pretty quick. Any other questions? Yeah. Correct. The one that if she wants to pursue a graduate degree, she would be independent. But the student going into college would be dependent.
It's in the number of dependents in the household. So the one that just graduated college, would she
Oh, I see what you're saying. In your total household size, probably not unless she's living with you, you're providing for her financially, yeah. You wouldn't include her. Yeah, so FAFSA doesn't ask about first gen, but the first gen definition that I subscribe to is neither of your parents completed a bachelor's degree in the United States. And I stress the United States because systems are different, so that is the definition of being first gen. So even if guardians did, they would still qualify. Yes. Yep. Bless you. If they are married to the custodial parent, yes. You'd have to put it. Yeah, because that question doesn't pertain to a tax cycle. That question is pertaining to when did you get married? You would put in that date, because it's married or remarried. Yes. Yes. Yes, but correct. And if you didn't file together, you won't be able to use the tool. You'll have to add each in manually. You did file together? So you'll have to enter each in separately, like parent 1, parent 2. Yep. Yes.
When you enter the parental financial information, you do that through the child's site, so to speak?
It's within the child's application, yes, but it's the parent section of the child's. Yep.
So what do you use the parental ID?
To link to the IRS and to sign the FAFSA. At the end, both students and parents have to sign it.
That's really the only thing you use.
Yeah. Yep. That's its only use, really.
Because we were talking about some people actually signed up themselves.
Right, because they go in and say they're a student and log in with theirs, and so it creates a FAFSA under the parent login.
So once you get the login, you don't use it.
No, just for IRS and just for signing. Yep. Yes, yep. But first generation does not come up in the FAFSA. They don't ask that. Yes, yeah, they don't ask. They'll ask parents' level of education, but they don't ask first generation status. Yeah, they can put whatever level of education. Yes, yep. Yeah, you can put college graduate, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it. Elizabeth Barrera is our ISAC representative. Her cards are on the table. She's a financial aid expert. She will actually be at LT every other Friday in the College and Career Center helping students with financial aid as a part of our FAFSA Friday campaign. So if your students want help, or even if you want help, she's also welcome to having families come in. So her information is out there, and I'll be available for questions as well. Thank you so much for being here.